That's what was going to have to happen. Big governments were going to have to accumulate it for you to see price levels. It wasn't going to be like just retail getting Bitcoin to $10 million. Having self-custody of your Bitcoin is so important, because if there is some like fork in the future and you are concerned, at least if you're custodying it, you now have both and you get to make a decision. You could hold one, you could sell one for the other. Again, if the US has some sort of like either by executive order or legislation mandate to hold and accumulate Bitcoin, I mean, it's what Bitcoiners started talking about over a decade ago. The game theory of countries just like rushing in comes into play.
I thought it was politics to our point, and then I realized it was the money 15 years ago. And then now I've gotten to the point in the last 5 years where I'm like, whoa, it's really good versus evil. And you can see it, Bitcoin helps expose that.
Bitcoin really is the only free market that's really ever existed. It is the purest form of capitalism. No one's ever forced anyone to use Bitcoin or mine Bitcoin. It is beautiful.
Mr. Neil Jacobs, thank you so much for being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters and joining me here today. The co-founder of the FOMO 21 shop. I just appreciate you being here. A good friend. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. It's good to see you.
So obviously a lot of things going on right now. The New Year is upon us. It is Genesis Block Day right now, which, you know, for those people that don't know, I would love for you actually to briefly, we're going to talk about Eric Trump and some of the things going on with Michael Saylor and what's been transpiring there. But before we get to that, I would actually love to have you explain to people that aren't super familiar with Genesis Block Day, the importance of that. And, you know, in my eyes, it's 1776, July 4th type of day. So I would love for you to explain a little bit of that to people who aren't totally, in tune with what this day really means.
Yeah. So, Bitcoin, the white paper was first published October 31st, 2008. But then a few months later, Satoshi started mining Bitcoin, and the Genesis block was launched on January 3rd, 2009. So it's kind of the start of this grand experiment, which is clearly, I guess it's still an experiment, but it's not one that looks like it's going to end anytime soon. Yeah, no, the importance of it is the longevity of Bitcoin, now 16 years. Incredible uptime since its launch. I think there's only been like 2 times it was like briefly off at the beginning. It has like a 99 point something % uptime over all these years. And even in the face of critics and, detractors and everything, we're still here today. So it's pretty awesome. Also on January 3rd, some Bitcoiners, they call it proof of keys days, which encourages people to take self-custody of their Bitcoin. I am concerned that message has been lost over the last year or so, where people are entering into other Bitcoin vehicles like MicroStrategy, the Bitcoin ETFs. And there's nothing wrong with people doing that. I'm not like, for or against, they all serve a purpose. But I think understanding the building blocks, no pun intended, of Bitcoin helps you kind of learn conviction. And maybe those things will serve as like a top of funnel where people first get exposed to either the Bitcoin ETFs or MicroStrategy, and then, get into Bitcoin and then self-custody and running their own node. But I am concerned about the, I guess, cypherpunk, values and reason kind of for Bitcoin being in existence, peer-to-peer money, censorship resistance, all those, good things that, we talk about.
It has to happen every cycle, I would imagine, right? Every current crop is thinking about, hey, the new people that come in, what's going to happen? And the old, well, not the old saying, and nothing is that old in Bitcoin necessarily yet, but, just you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And people eventually kind of come around. But I think there is a point, though. I think you would agree that, 10, 20, 50 years from now, if everyone's on a Bitcoin standard, just like the current monetary system, most people don't understand the system they're in, right? They're not going to understand Bitcoin, just like they don't understand this system, which leads me to the question of why don't people are still now today, like it's going to zero, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. what is going to change or even not change, I guess, between now and then? Because you're going to have people that are coming in at speeds as we go through this S-curve adoption. More people are coming in faster than education can even withstand, I guess. I don't know if the right way to say that, but is there this, inflection point, I guess, where there's the ethos is getting lost? Because I know, like George Gammon, for example, there's some of these guys who they'll agree on everything that Jeff Booth says, right? They've had these debates, but then he just says, well, hey, I just disagree. In like 100 years from now, I think people will revert right back to they don't understand the problems, and they revert right back to doing stupid things. And Bitcoin hasn't changed enough people, quote unquote. Bitcoin changes you, but did we change enough people? So, I mean, what do you think? Because I think this is kind of Saylor's big fear of do people care about sound money? I've had some good family debates this weekend, actually, with some very intelligent people, and that was their one fear as well. So anyway, what are your thoughts when it comes to that?
Yeah, it's so hard to say. Humans will continue to do stupid things. That saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, or something like that. But those who hold Bitcoin will be rewarded. So people may try to, people talk about paper Bitcoin and other, financial derivatives and products related to Bitcoin. And that's why I still preach to people, buy Bitcoin, self-custody it yourself. Because in the end, the protocol is still the protocol. Every 10 minutes, new blocks are produced. And that has served people, hodlers well over the years. But I am concerned about the education with Bitcoin, because now it's just people see number go up. They're like, oh, I'm going to get some exposure to this. They buy the Bitcoin ETF because it's easy, but they never will go that extra step in learning. A lot of people had to learn before the ETFs because there were consequences if you didn't learn. Right? If you bought Bitcoin, if you were able to figure it out and then left it on an exchange and the exchange, went under, you got wrecked. And, some people, they never came back after that. And some people, they learned the value of self-custody. Hard lessons to learn. But it really hardened a lot of Bitcoiners, right? It formed new Bitcoiners. All the terrible things that have happened in Bitcoin, Mt. Gox, FTX collapse, those have actually made Bitcoiners even stronger, right? The ones who get it makes them even stronger, those lessons learned. But, we'll see. One of the good things is there is a lot more education readily available everywhere. I mean, you have a podcast. It seems like everyone has a podcast these days, right? I mean, obviously, I'm being hyperbolic here, but there's so many podcasts, there's so many books, there's so many things at people's fingertips. And all it's going to do is them typing in the word Bitcoin somewhere on Google or YouTube, and then they find your podcast or they find another, and they start listening to someone and wait a minute, I own the Bitcoin ETF, but that's not really what that I shouldn't really be doing that. So I think there's still hope. But I think the dynamics are different now. So yeah, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I just know the people who do hold Bitcoin, learn how to self-custody it, do it in a responsible, secure, and safe way, they will be okay no matter what else happens around them. That's my guess.
Yeah, and it does feel different this time in the sense that, like you said, the toothpaste is out of the tube, or for thousands of years, you didn't have something you could fall back on. Gold and silver were the only option. And then it eventually got centralized. There's really no other way around it. And then there's nothing you could do. And then you're kind of screwed. But at this point, the toothpaste is out of the tube. People know too much. You have Elon stuff with free speech, all these things happening. But people are asking, 20 years ago, if you would have told me 20 years ago what the people are talking about today in kind of mainstream, I'll say mainstream as Twitter in a way, that's mainstream now, not legacy news, but you have these people all over talking about it's just what legacy news would call conspiracy theories. And these are things that was just people trying to get to the bottom of something and trying to find truth. And it was just hidden from everybody and no one could get answers. So it creates these theories and people saying, well, hey, it must be this if you're not being transparent with me. If you told me that 20 years ago, the mainstream people would be talking about that just every day on Twitter, I would have bet you any money in the world that would not be happening, because I thought we were going so far down the wrong. So the whole point of what I'm trying to say is as credence to what you're saying, I think you're right that it does start changing you. People, the toothpaste out of the tube are going that direction. Why is it you think that people don't question the current system, I guess, and they are to a degree, right? But we're in an echo chamber on Twitter a lot of times. So I say mainstream there, but at the same time, again, you talk to your average family member or whoever it is, and they don't question this system that we're in now, this fiat debt-based system, like they do Bitcoin. Like every rebuttal, every objection you get, you can just flip it around and say, well, why aren't you asking that about the current system? What is that? What's missing there in your opinion? Like, why are people continually doing the Stockholm syndrome thing?
Yeah, I think there's multiple reasons. So, first, a lot of people in the Western world, if they have like a comfortable life, there's no reason for them to question, the current reality because they think their current reality is sound. But more and more people, I think, are starting to question that, even in places like the United States, because things are getting tougher for them. And they're like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to work. My kids are going to school. We're doing the same thing. Why should things be getting tougher? Things should be getting easier over time as, technology gets, increases. Famously, like Jeff Booth talks about, like technology being a deflationary force. And I think it's just something also ingrained in us at a very young age. I'm sure you've, talked to either your parents or, people older than you, and they're like, oh, but back in my day, for a slice of pizza and a Coke, it was a quarter or a nickel or a dime or whatever their time period was, and it's just assumed, oh, the prices of things are just supposed to go up over time. The dollar's supposed to lose, its purchasing power over time. Not that people don't question. Should this not be happening? Is this a bad thing? It's just what you grow up in. It's like when you learn a language, you just kind of like, you learn it. It's just ingrained into you at a young age, and that just becomes your reality. So I think it's people who are living a good life and not suffering have no reason to question things. And it's also like a programming thing, right? We say the matrix, break out of the matrix. We've just been programmed from as soon as we asked our parents, oh, could I, have a video game? And they're like, that costs money. And it's just like, oh, so there's something called money and we just need to use it to get our video game. We don't think like anything more than that. It just works until it doesn't work. And that's why people not in, developed countries that have currencies that have been hyperinflating, they get it a lot more and a lot quicker and faster than Americans. It doesn't mean they're necessarily accumulating a lot of Bitcoin. One, they may be a lot poorer, and two, they need like stability in a stronger fiat currency like the dollar. But they understand the need for Bitcoin. It's kind of unfortunate because a lot of people understand it, either can't really save in it because they need, if they're poorer, they need to use all the money they have to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That might have been, I don't know if that was a long-winded way to answer your question or not. But.
No, it was perfect. It makes me think of Gladstein's book, right? Check Your Financial Privilege. And that you get that sense every time you talk to someone from a Western country, but generally Americans probably a lot of the time, where it's just, it's like, holy cow. It's like, we got to lower our ego, and every Bitcoiner has to go through that gauntlet of lowering the ego, lowering the ego and raising your humility. You mentioned I want to get to Eric Trump here in a few minutes and some of that stuff. I want to talk about the block size wars as well in a minute. You just made me think of something that I would love your thoughts on, but also the El Salvador. You just mentioned, again, these countries, these countries are adopting that might need it more, right, through remittances, or people are needing it in these other countries. And the El Salvador IMF thing that's going on, I know it's been kind of a contentious thing for Bitcoiners. There's obviously a lot of no coiners that have really been like, oh, see, told you, taking on more debt and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that, and just the IMF, them taking that couple billion, I think it was like $3 billion or something like that. And, they made some purchases with the, of Bitcoin as well. Do you think it's them just kind of, playing both sides and saying basically the Saylor playbook, like, hey, if you're going to give us cheap debt, we'll give you a couple of these little things and then we're going to go buy Bitcoin with it? Or what do you think was going on there?
I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is, people, at their core usually do what's in their self-interest, and a leader of a country is going to do what he thinks is in their self-interest. And if it's taking a few $billions to say these laws aren't enforceable or shouldn't count anymore, people are going to do that. I'm not sure the importance of El Salvador anymore in terms of, I think they were good, like first one through the door, and that takes a lot of courage. But, once countries like the United States or China or Russia start developing potentially either strategic reserves or some sort of like large position, the small countries who got in early, good for them. But in terms of El Salvador, I guess it's good. I mean, they should just use that IMF money to buy Bitcoin, right? Like, if they're going to do that, then brilliant chess move, not Nayib Bukele, beautiful. If they're going to do something just to kind of like sell out to central bankers and fiat overlords, like, that kind of sucks. But I guess we'll see what happens. I don't know. I don't have any like extra insight there. I'm not like on the ground there. So,
do you have any thoughts on any other G7 countries that you think might hop into Bitcoin this year? And we can keep that really broad. Like, I mean, could be legal tender to all the way to strategic Bitcoin reserve. Hell, even talking very positively about it. And, who knows, Canada saying, hey, this is a great thing now all of a sudden or whatever. Do you have anything on your radar for that this year?
I know if the United States starts accumulating Bitcoin, every country in the world, unless they have some like crazy ideological like leader who like hates like Trump or something like that, and just as like, again, an ego thing, might stop certain countries because their leaders are morons, to say it politely. But yeah, I mean, Germany, you mentioned G7. I believe they're one of the G7 countries. They had like, what, 50 million or $50 billion worth of Bitcoin, something insane.
I think it was 50,000 Bitcoin. That's what it was.
50,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting the number wrong. 50,000 Bitcoin, and they sold it all, when Bitcoin was like 50,000 or 60,000? That was only like 5 months ago or something. And look how like, boneheaded that looks now. And we've seen this for years. People never kind of like learn from those mistakes. But again, if the U.S. has some sort of like, either by executive order or legislation, mandate to hold and accumulate Bitcoin, I mean, it's what Bitcoiners started talking about over a decade ago. The game theory of countries just like rushing in.
I think it was even
comes into play.
Yeah, and that was even like some of that Hal Finney stuff too, in a way, wasn't it? I mean, it was just like kind of part of his 10 million per Bitcoin prediction, 15 years ago, basically?
Yeah, I know a lot of Bitcoiners, they get upset when they hear like governments are accumulating Bitcoin, or want to accumulate Bitcoin, which I get. They rather like individuals acquire it, but the cat's out of the bag. It's been 16 years now. There's very little people who haven't at least heard about Bitcoin now, like multiple times. And if this is what was going to happen in some form, if you thought Bitcoin was going to have, either be like the global unit of account or competing with the top fiat currencies, governments, that's what was going to have to happen. Big governments were going to have to accumulate it for you to see price levels. It wasn't going to be like just retail getting Bitcoin to $10 million. It just wasn't. You were going to have people ingrained in the institutions who get it. It doesn't mean we should bend over or lay down, maybe is a better way to say that, and just, not fight back anything that seems to threaten what we might believe is, the Bitcoin ethos and the purpose of it, right? I mean, we've seen on smaller scales, you mentioned the block size wars and, 20,000 other, altcoins and tons of Bitcoin forks. There's been a lot of like bullets thrown or shot at Bitcoin, and, Bitcoin has prevailed, and I think it will in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mentioned, we just brought the block size wars again. What are some lessons there? So this kind of encapsulates a lot of what we've just been talking about in a way. What are some of your thoughts? Because you've been in Bitcoin for a while. That's why it's interesting. Because sometimes, you talk to people who are just got in recently, and they're maybe a financial guy, or they've, we've seen a lot just in the last year, right? That have come on Bitcoin Twitter and Bitcoin X, and they have a really big following now, or whatever. Kind of along with the lines of what you were saying, with all of a sudden the MicroStrategy stuff comes into play. So Bitcoin's always attracting new characters, and that's where this lowering your ego, raising your humility thing comes into play. There's always someone that knows more than you, has more Bitcoin than you, smarter than you, whatever it is. So in saying that, the block size wars happened, what is that, 8 years ago, 9 years ago? Holy cow. And a while ago, 8 years ago, 2017. And it's a great book for anyone who hasn't checked it out. But what are some of the lessons there? You kind of living through that and seeing that happen. What are some lessons there that you see that people still need to learn? Again, basically, it feels like every 4 years, like we're learning a lot of the same things over and over again. But what are some of those lessons that, in going through that people still kind of have to realize about Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember in like 2017, I held some Bitcoin. I got the Bitcoin Cash fork. I wasn't really like tuned in, like a lot of people, into the the technicals and the block size war back then. I was more of like a degenerate like trader back then, with not a. But I guess what I would say is,
if you're liking this interview, but you're just wondering, you know what, Brandon, this is amazing stuff. And I get you have these guests on and they're talking about how orange pilling the world is so great and how Bitcoin is going to take over the world. How in the world do I educate my family and friends? How do I get people to understand what most people just don't care about, quite honestly? Bitcoin trading cards is the way to do that. When you open up these cards, you see the foil cards, you see the chase, you see the glossy cards, young, old, boy, girl, man, woman, it doesn't matter. People love these cards. It's awesome because they're super valuable, by the way. Amazing little side note. However, it Trojan horses them into the most important thing of the day. It's not politics. It's not all the things that we fight about. It's changing the money, fix the world. Bitcoin trading cards is the best way that we have going in order to do that, no matter who you are. You're going to love them. Playable Characters 10 for 10% off at checkout. Playable Characters 10 off at checkout. btc-tc.com. You're going to absolutely love these things. Now back to the show.
kind of just be patient, listen. It's an ego thing. You might not be right. In order for there to be big changes, you need to get consensus, right? You need a lot of people to see it your way. And you know, a lot of people complain today, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that, and now it's Michael Saylor's fault, or it's government's fault, or it's this person. If you have a good enough idea that's going to help add value to Bitcoin, I mean, go ahead, try to fork it off, see what happens, right? Like, go for it. I mean, you'll probably end up the same way as the tens of other copycats, Bitcoin Cash, you know, BSV, Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin whatever, right? There was like a million other things. But no one's stopping you. It's open source, you know, protocol. Get enough people to agree with you. I know it's easier said than done, right? Because like the Bitcoin network now has an incredible network effect. So even if you do have a good idea, to get something like implemented might not happen. But, you know, this is the way it's written. It's code. And you know, maybe that's part of will be seen as a weakness of some, but you know, in order for this experiment to last hundreds and thousands of years, we can't have people constantly changing things and tinkering with things. And I know that upsets a lot of people, but just do better. Convince people why things should be changed. Convince why your soft fork should be implemented, right?
Yep. Yeah, so true.
I mean, in the end, it's really like a marketing campaign. Can you market your idea better? And a lot of the really smart people who know things on a very technical level, that's not their skill set. Instead, they get like confrontational with others, and kind of it could come off as like an I know better than you kind of tone. So you may have a good idea, but you need to know how to like work a room. Someone who does, you know, organic marketing for a living, gets paid to do that, does it for companies, my own personal brand. You know, the social layer of Bitcoin is as important as everything else, because without people advocating for Bitcoin, maybe over time it would it would just move at a much slower pace. So my point is, you have a good idea, great, share it, let everyone know why it's a good idea, and be better at communicating it to other people.
Do you think that that's, again, I feel like we talked about this a little bit earlier too, but I know some people get it. This is my opinion of it, obviously, but they look at like, oh, BlackRock's going to come in and corrupt it. And that's why I brought up the block size wars, because the block size wars, again, go read the book for anyone who hasn't, a big entity can't just come in and just change the code. Neil just touched on it perfectly. You have to get consensus. You have to work the room. And that's, I think, where you have these big entities that in theory could change things. They could work the room. So they can't just come in and just change everything and steal your Bitcoin. But is there any concern to you about that, of people coming in like a BlackRock, or whether it's Saylor or whoever it is, and Elon Musk, someone that has a lot of sway, a lot of psychological sales ability, and could sway large amounts of people? And again, the answer maybe it's just, well, hey, we could fork it off, and like Andreas said, years ago, it's like, oh, good luck with your BlackRock coin, good luck with your NSA coin. Like, here we go again. Is that if that happened where they sway a majority of people to be like, hey, this is the right Bitcoin? Do the Bitcoiner ethos people just fork it off again? Like, how does that play out in your mind?
Well, it just reinforces why having self-custody of your Bitcoin is so important. Because if there is some fork in the future and you are concerned, at least if you're custodying it, you now have both.
Yeah.
And you get to make a decision. You could hold one, you could sell one for the other. Historically, selling whatever altcoin is like the new fork, selling it then and there or shortly after has allowed you to accumulate even more Bitcoin. So I know there's some Bitcoiners who would say, yeah, fork it. It's like it's free money for us. Sure, do your own thing. So a lot of people look at it as like this threat, and others are like, oh, it's an opportunity to just stack more Bitcoin because your thing's not going to work. But yeah, I mean, there's concerns. It doesn't keep me up at night. Bitcoin has, it's still young, but it's in 16 years today, but it always finds a way. And I think the incentives are aligned for it to continue finding the right way and having the most optimal outcomes. But look, not everyone may agree that the optimal outcome to one might not be to other, because you've asked Roger Ver, he'd say, oh, this wasn't the optimal outcome, right? He'd still be, he still screams about it today. But again, that goes back to the ego and humility and, maybe admitting you're wrong.
Yeah, so true. And we brought this up earlier too. I'm trying to find it somewhere. I have it saved somewhere, but I think it's from River, and it's a breakdown of where all the coins are basically. And it seemed pretty updated. And there was still I think it was 12 to 14 million in private hands. I want to say it was 14 million coins in private hands. Now there might be a couple million that are lost, or, no one knows exactly that part of it, I guess. But there's still a lot, to your point again. I wanted to give more credence to what you are saying, in the sense of there are a lot in private hands. People get freaked out about, hey, this guy's got 1% of the network, or BlackRock, yada, yada, yada. But they're a very small part of the network still. And I think that's where this, people talk about the centralization part of all these, only a certain amount of people have the coins, but in reality, it's going to keep getting dispersed as people sell, or as they work for Bitcoin and they get paid in Bitcoin, or whatever it might be. So I think that those fears are unfounded. To your point, I wanted to give more credence to that. In saying that, this is a selfish question in a way, but this is something I think about, where you mentioned it, 16 years, Bitcoin today has been here with us. And so everyone, most people in the world have heard of it probably at this point. Do you start questioning people like, hey, how have you not adopted this yet? Because I do, and I'll just say that up front. I kind of question people at this point, and I'm a little leery. I mean, it sounds funny at first, but I'm a little leery of and again, we go back to this ego humility thing. I kind of give it a type of thing, and it might be bad to me and people might, hate me for that. But to me, it's this ego humility check. It's not an IQ thing. It's not like, Neil's smarter than me or something like that. Brandon's smarter than me. It's this ego humility thing. Have you given that any thought at all at this point? Maybe 8 years ago, 5 years ago, not a thing, I don't think. But at this point, I'm leaning more that way every day.
Over the years, it's been a journey where, when I first kind of had my big orange pilling like moments and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And it's like, I got to tell all my friends and none of them give a shit. And then I want to tell my family and they're like, whatever you want to do, Neil, that's fine. Do your thing. Basically the reason I'm kind of talking to you today is because I had a lot of rejection from like peer groups who didn't want to talk about it. So I went to places where people wanted to like talk about Bitcoin.
True.
I never like wanted to work in the Bitcoin space. I never planned on having a merch and apparel store. I never planned on promoting conferences or going on podcasts. I just thought this was like super interesting. I wanted to talk to people. So I went on like Bitcoin Twitter, and then there was Bitcoin Clubhouse, and then there were all these other things, and then there were meetups, and I just wanted to talk about Bitcoin with people. So I kind of have shifted over the years from, and I think I'm going to get to your question and answer it at some point, but I've gone from wanting to try to convince people to not caring about convincing them, because I have so many people now that come to me that want to learn about Bitcoin. So I think it's better that my energy is focused on them. So I guess the original question is, do I think less of people? I guess in some way, I might question other things that they come to me with.
Yes.
It's a difficult situation because if I God forbid, needed brain surgery or something, and there was a brain surgeon and he was recommended as one of the top in the world, but he's like, oh, this Bitcoin thing's stupid. Would that stop me from like having him do that? I don't know. Absolutely. But maybe in certain things in life, I might be like, oh, if this person is so close-minded, maybe I would stay away. But again, Michael Saylor in 2013 said, something to the effect of, Bitcoin, the government, it's going to go the same way as like online gambling. I think implying that like the governments would like clamp down on it. And if you would have like said, oh, this guy's an idiot, like clearly he's not an idiot, right? He was just focused on other things at the time. So I think Bitcoiners need to be careful about jumping on certain people. I'm okay with going after critics of Bitcoin who have large platforms, but just like your average person, I don't really like look at them any differently for not understanding Bitcoin. I just know like we all broke out of that matrix at some point. We were all them at some point. So I can't like think less of them because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to be very clear that this is coming actually from a humility standpoint. Like you just said, you have to go through the gauntlet to get to this place. And then you touched on probably a better way of saying it in the sense of, I start questioning the other things they're doing in life. Like it's a protection mechanism that we all have as humans of judging people. Let's be honest. Like your safety for thousands of years depended on you judging what was happening and in aligning yourself with people who are going to further your existence, basically. So, people get caught up in all that, but this comes from a lowering the ego, increasing humility, and having that there and trying to watch your hubris. So I don't want anyone to get it twisted here. I'll still probably get hate for it, but it's a sense of, if you don't get it at this point, then I'm starting to question other things you're doing in life. Where's your attention? Where is your awareness level at? That's where it is. But to your point, yeah, exactly. We all come through it. We all come through the same gauntlet, through the same door you have to go through. So anyway, just wanted to make that very clear. I would say,
just to put a pin on what you said, I'd say it's a data point. It's like, oh, if they don't get this, maybe I should be a little concerned, but I wouldn't say like dismiss them completely.
Yes. Well said. Yeah. Well said. Okay. So Eric Trump that, obviously it was waxing poetic about Bitcoin just in the last, what was that? I guess 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. It was fairly recently over in the Middle East. And he surprised me. I'll say that. He really surprised me at his level of understanding of Bitcoin and what it means. Talked very well. I mean, he seemed like a Bitcoiner. I know his father has some ways to go, it seems, getting there. We just started the journey. We're all on the journey. And Eric seems to get it the most in that family so far. And he was, very poetic with how he was speaking about it. So I'd love your thoughts on that. And then leading up all the way to, I think it was yesterday, you were saying that Saylor was meeting with them. So I would love your thoughts on what this could potentially mean. And just in general, I think, where the Trump family might be at, but how they're aligning themselves and what this might mean for an SBR or what have you down the road here.
Yeah, it's really remarkable where we've come in Bitcoin. I remember having discussions going back 7, 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago now on Clubhouse, talking with people, and people would come on stage. The government's going to ban it. What if the government bans it? And the first I'd always say to them, which government, right? Because Bitcoin is this global monetary network. So if one government bans it just maybe incentivizes other governments. So the whole government banning it never really scared me. Obviously, the U.S. is the big kid on the block who you didn't want that to happen. And now we've really come full circle to not banning it, but full on embracing and adopting it. I think we have to be careful and keep our, don't put blinders on, because, again, people are just going to act based on their incentives in the end. So we need to be careful about governments accumulating positions. It shouldn't change what you do. You should self-custody. You should buy Bitcoin. But as far as Eric Trump specifically, yeah, I was really impressed with his speech at Abu Dhabi. He spoke for 30 minutes. It wasn't a short thing. And I might not have watched all of it, but most of what I watched, he seems like he really gets it. Last night, Saylor posted a picture, Eric Trump posted a picture with Saylor, and it looks like it's at Mar-a-Lago, and Eric Trump said, 2 friends, 1 passion, Bitcoin, with a rocket emoji. I mean, wow, right? The president's son. The president's son is saying that. Who in government that's about to be in this new government is against Bitcoin? No one. It's
Right.
literally no one. When I was fortunate enough to be at Saylor's New Year's Eve party, and there was a senator there. I'm not sure if I could say their name because I'll just generally. I said, "Oh, I didn't know you're into Bitcoin." They're like, "Yeah, I'm working with Senator Lummis on her bill." So the things are happening. There's things that are happening we don't even know about, that we're not even privy to on a daily basis, that are pro Bitcoin on its face anyways. So I'm just really excited. I do have the same concerns a lot of other people do, whether it's about large entities accumulating Bitcoin, governments accumulating Bitcoin. But I have my own understanding of Bitcoin, and just I guess faith, not a blind faith, that the incentives will work themselves out. So I'm not fearful of the negative. I'm aware, but I think things are going to really good things are going to happen really quickly.
In saying that part, what are you most excited about? Because that made me think of just what Ocean's doing. Like you said, the incentives are there to decentralize the system, to make it harder, to ossify, things of that nature. So what Ocean's doing for helping this mining centralization problem, I guess we'll call it. And then you have, I think personally, some of the coolest stuff is a lot of the personal mining that's coming out, right? Whether it's the space heaters or the water heaters and things like that. What are you most excited about in just the whole ecosystem right now?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I think getting individuals to mine is super cool. I was telling you before the show, I'm an advisor to a company called Abundant Minds, which does like co-location hosting in the Pacific Northwest. So right now, just in the United States. So you don't have to worry about some dictatorship stealing your miners. For new people to Bitcoin, I always say like buy Bitcoin first, learn how to self-custody, run a node if you want to dip your toe in something like mining. I think it's great to help, keep the hash power as distributed as possible. I think it's an awesome thing. Also, obviously mining, you have benefits like KYC Bitcoin, non-KYC Bitcoin, right? Which is cool. And for me, non-KYC Bitcoin is cool, not to like skirt the law or like to like evade taxes, but you should have the freedom that people don't know, what Bitcoin belongs to you and what doesn't. Like to me, that it just should be, that's like an ethical thing. Like you shouldn't know how much money I have or what money belongs to me. So I don't, that's how I come at it. So like the non-KYC aspect's really cool for mining yourself. And companies like, or, entities like Ocean, they're really, innovative, cool. I'm down for everybody just fucking going for it. As I said before, let the free market decide. If you have a good enough idea, people are going to adopt it. Just build, baby, build.
It really is the essence of a free market, right? I mean, Bitcoin is the truly only free open market we have out there. I had a lot of people at Christmas, during, when we were all together for Christmas, we just had a lot of people confusing capitalism with the money we use, and I was trying to explain to everybody, money is the foundation layer that the economic system sits on. And there was a lot of confusion of saying, it's like, well, they were confusing, like we need inflation. Inflation is part of capitalism. And they were confusing. And I was just like, holy cow. I mean, it's just, it really brings you back down to this, again, this humility, ego thing we talk about again, of just like understanding that and then really like meeting people where they are. It is mind blowing because it's just like, whoa. Like we got to piece these things out. These things are all separate dynamics that we've layered on top of each other. These are not like one thing. They're just not, it really is incredible when you kind of look at it. So, what did you look at the Ross Stevens, his Stone Ridge letter that had just come out recently about lending? Because that was another thing too I was going to mention about just lending in general, because I think that's going to be a huge thing. People lending it to Bitcoin, so they don't have to sell it, and stuff like that. Were you able to check that out?
I haven't been able to do a deep dive on that. I saw they put out their 2024 investor letter. I haven't been able to really read through that. I saw a video on YouTube of it being explained, but I haven't gone through that or read. I think it was like 26 pages. I just want to touch on what you were just saying with what was the last point before that we were just talking about? Decentralization.
We're talking about people
my train
confusing the two systems. No. They were confusing capitalism and inflation.
Yeah, well, this is the open secret, is that we've never really had capitalism. Like even in the United States, it's like a crony capitalism. There's regulatory moats that stop capitalism and free markets from actually flowing. But as you said, Bitcoin really is the only free market that's really ever existed. Yep. It is the purest form of capitalism. No one's ever forced anyone to use Bitcoin or mine Bitcoin, right? If regulations are too burdensome somewhere, people will take their Bitcoin miners and go somewhere else. They're trying to find the cheapest form of energy all over the world. It is beautiful. It is exactly what capitalism and free markets are supposed to be about. So I get why people blame capitalism and free markets, because their lives are getting harder and worse, and they're told, the US, it's the greatest country in the world because we have, capitalism. Well, we don't really have capitalism. It's crony capitalism. So it's no surprise that you get more and more people like radicalized into having like more like socialistic views when the system isn't working for them, and they think the system is capitalism. Of course, they're going to like go the other way. But this is where Bitcoin's super important because it actually is a model for free markets and capitalism. And, when people get exposed to, I used to be like super liberal back in the day, and I had a lot of these thoughts, but Bitcoin really opened up my mind. It's a mind virus about human incentives and how things, really work when they're just, when it comes down to it and gone free, I guess you could say.
Let's actually unpack that really quick. You bring up something interesting. What are some of the things that it changed for you? Because I want to preface it with this. I come from a very conservative political world that I grew up in the 2000s. I was very political. It was Constitution, founding fathers and all that jazz and strong military. I mean, Bitcoin completely ripped my world open, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, as I'm learning about Bitcoin and then understanding, whoa, we've used the dollar, all this to weaponize and become an empire, do all the shenanigans and the financial system. You can't capitalism harder, bro. That's why I still get a lot of people on the right. It's just we'll just be better, just capitalism harder. It's well, you can't. And you kind of just outlined some of that, right? In the last couple of minutes. And that's where it just made me think of all this and now you're bringing up, coming from the left. So I think it's just a fascinating discussion because it aligns everybody. And you realize 99% of this didn't matter. So what are some of those things that you're like, because we all have those big things that it changed for us. What are some of those things where you're like, dude, that was a huge one. That was a big thing that really shifted for me.
Yeah, I guess I came from a lower middle class family. So we never really had that much. I mean, my parents were amazing, and always I was shielded from tough times, and just as I saw a lot of inequities in society, and wanted to be I want that stuff. Why is that not happening? And then you find things that confirm your thought process. So it's oh, again, if this is capitalism, well, it's not working for us, so screw this, right? Also, I was kind of developing my political ideologies in the early 2000s. 9/11 happened. We went to Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. So then I was against the whole Republican Party and a lot of Democrats, and so
yeah.
So that's probably why I started forming my opinion. It's why are we spending money on foreign wars when, people are suffering here at home? So I think that's kind of how my initial, why I was started off probably more, to the left. But then Bitcoin kind of pulled me, I guess I'd say, to the center. I don't identify with any party. I'm not, right. I'm not registered anymore. I'm unaffiliated. Bitcoin just kind of, as you were saying, money is, the foundation of a society. If the money is broken, why am I even going to waste my time debating political issues? Right? It's it's a complete waste of the energy. So I'm going to refocus and focus on something that I think will help the world. And once I did that, I stopped caring about left, right, what's on the news on any given day, this immigration, that immigration, abortion, not abortion, whatever. And I'm focus on the money. And I'm able to because I started off more, left, and then I came to Bitcoin, which tends to attract more right-leaning people naturally because they're about separating anything from government. So you separate money from government, of course. More conservative people are going to do that. At least in theory, conservatives are for those things. But once they get into government, they end up, not being conservative. So I kind of I look at the left of this country, I look at the right, and I kind of just observe. And I just see how it's a circus. And it's all these people just acting in their own best interest. And then I'm all right, nope, I'm just going to focus on the money. I'm going to focus on Bitcoin and educating and advocating for that. And then eventually, as Bitcoin gets larger and larger and larger, the left-right paradigm gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
These things will shrink to not like maybe complete irrelevance, but they will not have the sway over the hearts and minds, over the economic engine of this country and of the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is funny. It's like you can't sum it all up into one thing, but it feels like, well, I was gonna say 20 years ago, but really to this day still, it feels like a lot of people, well, it probably has switched to a large degree, but it's, for a long time, it felt like the left thought like, well, people in the government, they're going to do the right thing. And like these things are going to happen. And the people on the right were like, hey, F the government, I'm going to go to the government and we're going to change things. But then they'd go there and like you said, they change and then become the government. And it was just like this weird, vicious circle of like no one being right. Like it was just like you said, I mean, it was just, it's so insane. But again, because of the broken money incentivizing all of these things to happen that way. So
yeah, I would see all these conservatives be anti-government, but you want to be a part of government? Well, I need to be a part of it to dismantle it, but then they never dismantle it. They just, pay off their friends. So, just whatever.
Yeah, it's like you get in and realize you can't do anything about it because the deep state and the swamp, the blob, whatever you want to call this thing is so massive. Like good luck. And then you realize like, oh my gosh, the only way I can win is if I just join it and just like try to get something out of it, because the whole thing is going down and just no one's told us that for 20, 30, 40 years from the inside until kind of now we're starting to realize that, I guess. But gosh, it's just,
I don't know if I believe in like necessarily like an organized deep state. I think just the government's so big, you have so many factions with different things. Like some people think like there's, but I guess I don't know how people think about it. I just think you have so many factions within government that some are just going to go off and do their own thing. And that's what's going to happen when things get so big.
Honestly, Neil, this is not a topic for today's discussion. Maybe some other time we'll have to debate this, but I truly think, because I know like BJ, we've had these discussions too, BJ Dichter, so people know who we're referring to. Yeah, exactly. I know we've all hung on many times, and we've had these discussions, and it's evil spirits versus good spirits. Like I'm convinced that like politics is down here. You have the money here, this layer, but then you have good versus evil up here, and it's really like good versus bad, or good and evil, or doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing. And broken money incentivizes constantly layering on trillions of bad decisions on top of each other. And that's where you get these malincentives. To your point, like I used to think 10, 15, 20 years ago, I thought it was like a guy at the top or some people doing it, but it's just good versus evil. And like when you're incentivized to like be selfish and the broken money and just get mine, then all those layers and millions of people doing those same things on a broken system, then it just spirals out of control this way, instead of, hey, there's an answer now over here. We can align all these people. And that's hard for people to imagine because we've never had it before. So anyway, it's a topic for a different day. I mean, you touch on it if you want, but it's a very deep issue of which I know not a lot of people are ready to necessarily hear yet. But for 15, 20 years, I've been thinking about this, and it's just like, it's finally, I thought it was politics to our point. And then I realized it was the money 15 years ago. And then now I've gotten to the point in the last 5 years where I'm like, whoa. It's really good versus evil. That's starting all this. And you can see it. Bitcoin helps expose that, at least in my opinion. It really exposes those and who's incentivized by what side. Which side are you choosing?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really get into the good and evil stuff too much. I mean, humans just everyone's like capable of like good and bad things, right? I just think to your point about when the incentives are broken, it encourages bad decisions. Yep. And sometimes those could be evil decisions. Some of those times that could just be bad capital allocation. Sometimes it could be not having long-term vision, but it incentivizes a ton of bad decisions. That it gets that whole, fix the money, fix the world. And do I think the world's going to be perfect if Bitcoin's in place? No. But I think there will be a lot of, positive second, third, fourth order effects that come out of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is wild, in putting a pin in this, that all those iniquities that you would see from the right or the left 20 years ago, we'll call it, when you and I were, the same age growing up, in essence, that it brought us to the same place. Like it really does truly. I think that's what's so weird for someone who's not in Bitcoin. Once you cross that Rubicon, you are like, whoa, like all of us really believe like 99% the same thing. That's what I think is the most astounding. And you said something that made me think of that too, where all these people from different ends of the spectrum come together and you realize, whoa, we're actually aligned on like pretty much everything. It's really fascinating. Lou Groman was just on Preston's podcast, and I was listening to that. He was talking about, I want to talk about the SBR really quick. And he was saying that he was thinking that it'd be better because we've already been talking positively about the SBR. Trump has, whatever, for months now, really. And people have been telegraphing this. There's got to be other nation states obviously buying, and you don't necessarily want to let the cat out of the bag before you get to do it yourself in theory. So his thought was, why not just talk positively about it? Don't be surprised if on day one it doesn't happen and we're not doing this executive order thing. We're not passing it. It doesn't happen maybe for a little bit. And it's just positive talk. And maybe we're doing something in the background, but then, 6 months from now or a year from now, they're like, oh, by the way, we've got a bunch of Bitcoin and we're doing X, Y, and Z. Do you have any thought on that of which way? Because again, I know it's a little bit of a contentious issue too. Like you get Pierre, there's, they have the debate stage where it's like government should be in there, government should not. We do this, do that. What are your thoughts on the best way? Or, if Neil, if you were running things, how would you kind of handle it and go about it?
Well, I've heard a lot of different people opine on this. Obviously, like, if you're about acquiring Bitcoin at a cheaper price, like telegraphing what you're going to do doesn't necessarily help. However, with executive orders or legislation, you're telegraphing exactly what you're going to do. So I don't know if there's any like backdoor way for them to accumulate Bitcoin without announcing it first. Which will put the U.S. at a disadvantage because you'll have other countries where they don't necessarily have like a democracy or same sort of like checks and balances, more like authoritarian types will just keep accumulating. They're not going to get ask permission. The strategic Bitcoin reserve, it was never really something that I like cared much about. I'm more like, I would much prefer people talk about getting rid of capital gains taxes on Bitcoin and any type of tax on Bitcoin than talk about a strategic
Agreed.
Bitcoin reserve. Because to me, Bitcoin's just money. And why should I have to pay taxes for just like wanting a better money? It seems absurd. I have no idea how this is going to play out. I know people seem bullish on it. Again, I'm in the Bitcoin like echo chamber. So everyone's like rah, rah, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, just your quick thoughts, and then we'll wrap with the last little question or two. Your quick thoughts on Saylor, because we were just touching on this. Money. Like you just said, Bitcoin's money. And I wholeheartedly agree. Capital's gone, or Saylor's gone on this. It was property. Now it's capital. Won't say it's money. Is that just him kind of playing both sides of the fence? He's obviously the man under the gun, under the spotlight, I guess, so to speak. Is that him just kind of trying to talk out of both sides of the mouth, you think?
I don't know if I'd phrase it that way, but what I would say is, look at the circles that he's in, right? He's now might be an advisor in some capacity to Trump, right? He said he would be on a council if he wanted to. So he's got to be very careful about what he says, and in front of who people, and in front of, what people he's in front of all the time. I think it's okay for Bitcoiners should be critical of him and everyone else in the Bitcoin space.
Agreed.
But I'm not going to get into what does he really mean? Is this 4D, chess? I think Saylor, just based on what I've seen publicly and a few personal private conversations I've had over the years, I think he gets it. He's a Bitcoiner through and through. This is his legacy. So I think his brain and heart are in the right place. But again, always be skeptical and be constructive and cheerful, as he says.
I love that you said that, because I'm on the same page, and I think that it's honestly it's good to question, and you should question. You should question everything with boldness, as Thomas Jefferson opined a couple hundred years ago. At the same time, you have to game theory it out, right? Like you got to let's play this out. The guy could have retired. He had billions of dollars already. He could have sold the MicroStrategy. Could have done all these things. And now here he is spending all his time going on Bitcoin pod. You know, he could be sailing the world on his yacht for crying out loud. You know, he could have just been like, F all you people. And here he is taking all his time to do this stuff. I mean, it doesn't make sense, you know, otherwise.
No, he really gets it. I was at an event with him. I don't want to say specifically, where I didn't expect him to really talk about Bitcoin. And all he did was talk about Bitcoin for half the time because it wasn't really the type of event you would. So it really doesn't matter. Like, that's when I first was like, oh my God, like this is like not some like scam or anything. Yeah. This was years ago. Not that I thought he was scamming. I just you know, there wasn't something bigger at play that I couldn't think about. No, he really cares about Bitcoin. You know, it gives him, it looks like, it seems, and this is just out of my mouth, like it gives him purpose. He had an interview a month ago or a few weeks ago with Natalie Brunell, and I think he used the word that he was depressed. He built MicroStrategy and just couldn't get it any farther. And he, you know, Bitcoin, you know, kind of made him see the world a different way. You know, he always talks about Bitcoin is hope, right? Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is hope. You could get that shirt on FOMO 21. Bitcoin is hope. Or do we have a hope shirt? No. But, you know, and I think it was hope for him. And I, you know, people think, what happens if Saylor just like dumps all his Bitcoin one day, or he's doing it privately, selling like this is such a bigger like thing than that. It's not, this isn't like a quick, like, it's not like to make more fiat. It's much bigger than that. Right. And again, doesn't mean you shouldn't be critical. It doesn't mean that you can't be concerned. Oh, is it like bad for one entity to hold all this Bitcoin? Mm-hmm. But I don't think his intentions are like nefarious at all.
Yeah, such a great answer. I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, that was a great segue here into the last, you know, little question or two as we wrap here. FOMO 21, the shop. Let's talk about that for a second. You know, we just mentioned the shirt you can get, but how did that come about? And yeah, there you go. And I would love for you to just you know.
So FOMO21.com, FOMO21, how did it come about? March of 2022, so a little over 2.5 years now. My now business partner, Ryan, reached out to me. He slid into my DMs on Twitter. And he even said, I'm not going to ask you how your trade's going, because, you know, that's what all the bots used to say. And he's like, you know, I've been in the merch and apparel space for 20 years doing sports merch and apparel. I've been following you in the Bitcoin world. And, you know, you've kind of been part of my orange pilling journey, Neil. I think you'd be a good person to partner with on doing Bitcoin merch and apparel. So I set up a call with him. We talked for like an hour, and I'm like, this guy's the real deal, and I'm ready to do this. A month later, we met at Bitcoin 2022 in Miami, and we were kind of off to the races. And it's fun. It's a passion for me. I tell people I get to bring Bitcoin memes to real life, you know, out in the wild, people wearing them. And we have stuff for like men, women, children, whatever. And we're constantly trying to expand, hit new markets. We've shipped to, the last I counted a few months ago was over 67 countries and territories throughout the world. So it's probably over 70 now. I haven't, ran the math, but I'm sure it is by now. And I'd love to make it 100 countries or 200 countries. However many countries there are, I'm not sure. But however many countries there are, except the ones where it's illegal for us to send certain things to that are on the U.S. sanctions list. So if you live in, I guess, I don't know, Russia or North Korea, sorry, we can't ship out there. It's so much fun. I love it. It's something I own. I help manage it. I even do the designs for it. I don't know if people know that. I do almost all the designs. Now I'm getting a little help from AI, where I didn't. The last like 6 months, I've been leaning a little more on some like AI stuff. But yeah, 90% of the designs on the site I did myself. So it's a lot of fun.
So cool.
I actually have a cool story from the other night. Well, I don't know if it's like a private story. I'm not going to say it just in case. I know. Oh, what a teaser, right? But it was a FOMO 21 thing. But yeah, no, FOMO21.com. Definitely check it out. And yeah.
Well, every time I go to a conference, I'm always seeing your stuff, your gear all over the place. So that's for sure. And you do have some cool stuff, and we'll link to all that obviously, so people can check that out.
I appreciate it. I got to hook you up with some sort of discount code. I should give you an affiliate code, Brandon, so you can get some commissions off anyone that sees this.
There you go. No, I appreciate it, Neil. Thank you. I love your stuff. Any last words of advice, and where can people find you?
You can find me at Neil Jacobs on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn, Neil Jacobs. I recently had to create a new Instagram account. My Instagram got permanently banned, which is hilarious because I have like 80,000 impersonators and they never ban them. So I think the new account is just the real Neil Jacobs. Not that I really put everything you can find. I post usually on Twitter, anyways. And yeah, you said where could people find me at, and what was the other thing? Final thoughts.
And any last
I would
words.
just say,
final thoughts.
If you're watching this for the first time, learn about Bitcoin, buy it, self-custody it, accumulate. Don't get caught up in all the other Bitcoin vehicles. I'm not saying they can't necessarily outperform Bitcoin, but I don't know they will for sure. I mean, I don't know anything that will happen for sure, but I have a strong conviction in Bitcoin. That's where, that's where my eggs are in that basket. So just learn about Bitcoin, self-custody, running a node. It's not that complicated. It's not scary. It's not me projecting. And because I've been in the space a long time, it's not that difficult. Just take baby steps, start with small amounts, and you'll do great.
Thank you, Mr. Neil Jacobs, for joining me today and being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
If you like this interview with Neil Jacobs, you're going to love the one we just did with Zuby about the cultural rot infesting the world and how Bitcoin is going to change that. You're going to love this one. Check this one out here. Come on. Or you might love the one we just did with Leon Vankum, real estate and Bitcoin expert, and how real estate is being disrupted everywhere by Bitcoin. Check that out here. Come on. We'll see you inside. These are great episodes. You're not going to want to miss them. Come on. We'll see you in there.